Okay. Well, I guess I will get started with some of the intro stuff while we wait for more people to come. Of course, we know there's always attrition for these things, so I'm not going to have any expectations. But for those who are joining today, most of you probably know me. I'm Alex Jazulik. I am the Senior Membership Officer with the Pacific Council. Excuse me. And I'm really excited to share these resilience tools with you today. I do have a couple of notes that I'm going to share before getting into the content, but I would like to encourage those of you who are calling in, if you're interested and comfortable, to use the chat function throughout the webinar. I'm going to be mostly sharing information, but to the extent that you all would like to interact with each other, I encourage it. But if you wouldn't mind, just to get us started, plopping in the chat your name, if you have a professional affiliation or industry that you're coming from, and any thoughts or interests that bring you here today. Would love for you to share that in the chat. But just a couple of things I will get us started with. So this resilience presentation is coming from a couple of different directions. One is on the membership team. We are doing our best to ideate and come up with new opportunities for our members that make them feel supported and empowered. There's a lot of content that we're providing about the world, and I think that's great. We're a global affairs organization, but we also want to address other parts of the self while you are with us, and hopefully make you feel good. And so this is just one of those tools. The slides themselves were developed by Damien Goldvarg. He is a professional coach. I am, as I was saying at the beginning of the call, in a coaching program through USC, and he is our supervisor, coach, and trainer. And he put most of these slides together, though I've augmented them a little bit. So just want to shout him out, and I'll share his contact information if any of you are interested.
Why?
Hello? And if you wouldn't mind muting yourself while you are on the line, that would be great. I'm going to see if I can.
Wait, what is it? Who is it from?
Are you talking to me?
You know why Gmail won't, you should say Gmail won't load it because they're overloaded.
Right, clearly,
with
hold on one
emails.
second. Let me find a way to mute this person. Nassim?
No, Gmail is
Manage participants and mute. Sorry if I get a little pink because it's a little nervous and I'm doing this presentation, but we got it. So Nassim is muted, but for new people coming in, please share your name and your where you're coming from and why you're here today in the chat. And like I was saying, Damien Goldvarg put a lot of these together. So if you have any interest in coaching or in the content of this and would like to learn more, I can share that information. And the last little caveat I'll share at the start of this is that this is going to appeal to the right side of the brain. So for those of you who may be coming in with expectations around really in the weeds tools, this may not be the presentation for you. This is going to focus more on concepts and on emotions and feelings to some degree, and I hope that you find that of use. So to start us off, I'm actually going to have a center. It'll be helpful for me to be fully present for this presentation. So I'm actually going to time 2 minutes. I know most of you probably are on mute and maybe have your video off, but I am going to give us 2 minutes, and we're just going to take some time to breathe and center ourselves. I know a lot of you may be coming from stressful days, things going on, and I want to just give us a moment to reorient our brains to this kind of learning. So I'm going to take 2 minutes starting now, and I would like everybody to just take a moment with your feet firmly on the ground, eyes closed, and just breathe in and out. Breathe in. And breathe out. Breathe in. Breathe out. While you continue breathing, I encourage you to reflect if there are any things troubling you, anything else that you might be thinking about. Acknowledge those things. Couple more breaths. Okay. Finish your breathing. I feel better. I hope you all feel better. And again, I'm looking forward to putting this presentation on for you today. So let's get into it. Yeah? Okay. So let me just move forward here. Okay. So what is resilience? So there's a lot of definitions out there, and I think different folks probably have different individual relationships with the concept of resilience. Again, our focus today is going to be to better understand what individual resilience means, what it looks like, and a couple of frameworks, lenses that you can use to make it work for you. So here, this study in 2002, the definition here is say, ability to persevere in the face of stressors and to bounce back from setbacks. It's connected to psychological well-being, personal development, success and happiness, and it's often associated with bouncing back or coping with stress and change. So I think key here is recognizing that there's a degree of resilience that has to do with through a period, and there's a degree of resilience that has to do with, you know, making the most of that challenge, not in a way that, you know, doesn't make the experience, the journey of getting back to normalcy pleasant, but makes it where you can continue your goals. Can people mute themselves? Thank you. Okay, so I want to differentiate this concept from stress and anxiety, which is an area that I think you know, people often associate as sort of maybe the opposite of resilience, or maybe what resilience is combating. So anxiety here is defined as a feeling of unease, typically about an imminent event or something with an uncertain outcome. So very kind of focused on the future, something coming up. Stress is a state of mental or emotional strain or tension resulting from adverse or very demanding circumstances. So this is often, we feel stress when we feel we have so much on our plate that we don't have enough resources to complete it. So it's very focused on our present situation. So again, as we're thinking about resilience and being individually resilient, we also want to acknowledge the different types of stresses and challenges that we may experience so that we can manage them effectively. So throughout the presentation, we've got a lot of inspirational quotes, or I hope they're inspirational. And so here's the first one. Resilience is knowing that you are the only one that has the power and the responsibility to pick yourself up. I think this definition focuses a lot on the concept of agency within resilience, and really the degree to which each of us has we're the only ones that are able to shape the narrative and perception in our own brain. And so putting the emphasis on persevering through challenges back on ourselves, even if we are inclined to externalize a lot of that stress, to point blame, maybe all of that is valid. Ultimately, we have the power within ourselves to be resilient and to pick ourselves up. Here we see resilience as the capacity to be resourceful and creative, to make choices and to take effective action no matter what's going on around us. So I think the word that stuck out to me when I first heard this presentation was creative. And I think for those of you who maybe have had some time to reflect on the last month and a half or so on how you've gotten to this point, I'm sure many of you can identify areas where you've had to use immense creativity, whether in your individual lives or at your organizations, and how powerful creativity can be in being resilient and being able to see a different future than where you currently are. Here we have a good half of the art of living is resilience. I think this is also impactful from a perspective side where you say, you know, resilience is so much of how we live our lives. It's not just in the present. I know sort of the impetus of this presentation is, you know, the pandemic and its, you know, many, you know, different impacts that has had on our lives. But recognizing how much of our lives before this required resilience, and how much strength it has built in us, and how resilience is to be being resilient and challenges in our lives is to be expected. And so I hope that that's a additional way that you might reframe in your own brain, in your own perception, what resilience means for you, not just today, but throughout the course of your life. Great. So here we'll dive down a little bit deeper away from some of the quotes and sort of definitions into how you can start to use this directly in your life. So stress affects you at a couple of different levels, and being able to identify the different domains that stress impacts you is helpful in determining what strategies you want to use to improve your mental health. So the first one here is how significant those life events are for you. So to what degree is this, you know, a significant impact in your life? You know, we can differentiate different stressors. That could be, you know, running late to a meeting is relatively small potatoes in most cases compared to, you know, perhaps a loved one who is experiencing hardship. And so being able to differentiate in your mind the magnitude of those stressors can be really helpful in, again, retaining perspective and also identifying solutions for yourself. The second is your personal capacity to cope with change. I think each of us is on somewhat of a spectrum in terms of how we relate to change. Are we change averse? Do we lean into change? There's no value judgment here. All are valid approaches, but whether you are comfortable with change or not may impact your immediate sort of ability to react to new stimuli, to new experiences, and recognizing that you may need to differentiate or call out your relationship to change when these things are happening in order to effectively address them. And the last is your support system. So recognizing that we are social beings, all of us have supports in some fashion, whether family, people who are at work. There are, you know, many sources that you might call upon, but being able to place the stress that you're experiencing within the, you know, the broader context of the tools and supports you have. Tools like this presentation. I'll also be sharing some additional resources at the end of the presentation that you can use, but also the human component of resilience and that emotional need that we have. I should note as we're going through, for those who joined late, if you want to drop your name and affiliation in the chat, if you have any questions or resources that you want to share with the group, or if you have thoughts that are percolating as this presentation goes on, feel free to put them in the chat and engage with each other. That's totally cool. I may not be able to respond because of the setup on this, but encourage you to engage as you would like. Okay. Another quote. Resilience is very different than being numb. Resilience means you experience, you feel, you fail, you hurt. You fail, but you keep going. I think if we were to look at our reaction to stress, anxiety, challenges on a spectrum, we can see it as a total mental breakdown or total shutdown roboticism. Resilience is not about roboticism. It's not about shutting down your emotions or refusing to acknowledge what's going on around you. It's about being able to acknowledge what's happening to you, to identify ways that can improve how you relate to that situation, and to persist. Really, persevere, persistence, resilience. It's a family of concepts that I hope resonates with folks here. But you know, recognizing that we're not asking you to shut down your emotions in order to get through this. That's, in my word, as somebody who's not trained in this, you know, a total traumatic breakdown that your body might turn on if you were to go to that extreme. And I'm hoping that resilience gives us a middle ground. Okay. So here's another framework that I hope could be helpful. So this framework of the 4 Bs focuses on the four different domains in our life that we can look at to check in with ourselves and see how we are, you know, to what degree we're nourishing these different parts of ourselves. And so I think the mind-body connection is the very first that we talk about here. It's how do we physically feel? I don't know about some of you, but before, and this is not a model of resilience, but it's a reality. Before this, I was really doing good with sort of balancing my diet and getting my regular exercise in, and seeing the benefits of those kinds of activities on my mental health was very stark and clear. Moving into quarantine, I can say personally that I definitely moved a little bit to the numb side, not sort of practicing what I preach here, but recognizing that investing in your body, understanding that how we treat our bodies impacts our mental health and our ability to be resilient is really, really a key factor that many of us may not always invest in as much as we would like to. The second is our mental, emotional, or our brain here. So thinking about how much space are you giving yourself to process your feelings, your thoughts, your emotions. They're oftentimes when we don't give ourselves this time, it gets cluttered. It makes it harder for us to move forward, to make decisions, and recognizing that there are tools out there. There are, moving down to the social, there are people out there, whether it's a therapist, a friend, support systems, where you can unpack some of those experiences. But this is another area that we should all be focused on if we want to be resilient and move forward. The last two here we see are behavior, or the social, and beliefs, spirit, the soul. So from the behavior, again, we're talking a lot about people here. I know that can be challenging where most of us are sheltering at home and may not have the same supports in person that we are used to. But of course, it's the 21st century, and even if they are imperfect substitutes, there are lots of ways that we can sort of nourish that part of ourselves, the social part, without feeling like we have no recourse in a virtual environment. Whether that's tools like the virtual happy hours that we're putting on, Zoom parties with your friends, phone calls with loved ones. I think a lot of these tools are pretty obvious, but just want to point them out as areas where you should put it into your resilience diet, so to speak. And lastly, beliefs. Personally, I am an atheist, and so I don't speak from the sort of religious side, but I think as a humanist, an atheist, recognizing, being able to tap into the part of ourselves that feels purpose, that feels connection to sort of like our reason for being, I think that can be also a really powerful place. So if you do observe some religious practice or spiritual practice, that can be another great area for you to consider investing your time. Otherwise, hopefully you can find an alternative that also speaks to that part of yourself. Okay, here's another quote. In the face of adversity, we have a choice. We can be bitter or we can be better. Those words are my North Star. I think this, obviously with the alliteration, it can be very memorable. You can be bitter or you can be better. And I think this goes back a lot earlier to, resilience being our personal responsibility, our ability to function being our own responsibility, and being able to change the narrative in ourselves, in our brains, into something that is more positive, even when it can feel counterintuitive based on the things that might be happening to us, is again a powerful tool, a powerful lens that we can use in our lives to be resilient. Okay, a couple strategies again, bringing it back down to the tactical here. So a couple strategies. One is develop an optimistic mindset. That one may resonate with some more than others. Some may say, how the hell are we going to be optimistic when there's so many pieces of evidence around us that shows that we should not be optimistic. And I don't want to delude anybody. I think we all know that blind optimism, being Pollyanna-ish, doesn't serve any purpose, because the higher the expectations we set, the more room we have to fall, so to speak. That being said, if we reframe it a little bit to being optimistically realistic, I hope it can be helpful in terms of being able to create positive momentum in your life when you see that there is a positive possibility waiting for you, should you be able to persist. I think, for me, there's a lot of things in my life that I'm, working towards this year. I know many of you may feel the same way. There might have been things that, maybe look different than they did 2 months ago. And being able to reorient away from a pessimistic, negative mindset into something that can motivate you, I think is a really useful tool. Though I know it's easier said than done. The second one here is identify destructive thinking patterns, pessimistic thinking. So this is kind of the flip side. So not just creating optimism from scratch, but also really being able to dig deep and notice when your thinking turns to negative patterns. And being able to identify why that is, what your triggers are, and how you can use language and the supports. We talked about the 4 Bs earlier to change your perspective. I mean, if you can do that, I think that will be an incredible input to your personal resilience strategy. And lastly, here we see break down problems into attainable mini goals. I think this speaks to project management for the self, I guess. So, being able to see there are steps we can take every day, or whatever, that are attainable, that can, again, create momentum. I'm thinking, I'm doing this coaching program in conjunction with all the work that we're doing at the Pacific Council. And there have been days, I will admit, where I said, well, this is a lot of work. And I don't know how I'm going to do all this on top of all the new responsibilities that are needed for my job and some other things in my life. And, if you just sit down and say, okay, I'm going to go on the roof and read 10 pages and see what happens. I just feel so much better. I'm getting things done. I'm making progress on the things that matter to me. And I'm not allowing the enormity of some of the things that I need to deal with to bog me down from making progress. And so I know these are muscles that we build over time, but recognizing that just being able to bite off little bits of the big goals that you have can be a great strategy in moving forward in your life. Okay. Although the world is full of suffering, it is also full of the overcoming of it. Helen Keller. I think particularly noting the speaker, the quoter of this, but also recognizing that it can be also very powerful to think about how many times in our lives we have suffered. Suffering is built into the fabric of the human experience, and I think being able to look back and see all the times that we suffered and we survived, even if the enormity or the quality of that suffering differed, being able to recognize what worked for you, that you made it through, can again be a mental tool to persist, to remain resilient. And we're going to get towards the end of the presentation soon. We have a couple more slides. So I thank you all for hanging on, and hopefully this is all useful. Again, feel free to add things in the chat. I know this is a sort of a one-way presentation here, but so here we have another set of tools, the 5 C's. This comes from an article from the Straits Times in February, before the magnitude of this experience hit us here in the States. I should note that this presentation was actually created originally for a Chinese audience in sort of some of the peak there. And obviously it persists to be useful for us now. So there's 5 areas here. Again, there's the 4 Bs and the 5 Cs. So hopefully you can retain some of this. So being calm, cautious, considerate, caring, and collectivistic. I think some of these overlap a little bit, but we start with calm. I think, again, in terms of recognizing negative or destructive thinking patterns, also recognizing when we get riled up, when we're allowing the stimuli around us to overtake us, being able to remain calm allows us to have a level head, allows us to make better decisions, and to feel better. Cautious, I think this kind of goes back again to the optimistic realism. We should be moving forward, but we shouldn't be operating without care. There is a degree of caution involved. There's a degree of calibration that is necessary. It shouldn't hold us back from taking action, but it should qualify the action that we take. And then I'll kind of lump the last three together, considerate, caring, and collectivistic. I think I've been really heartened. I hope that you all have had a similar experience at the sheer number of people out there who are willing to share a kind word with you. You know, for me, as a Pacific Council staff person working in membership, working with, you know, over 1,000 members, obviously not every day, but the number of notes that we've gotten from people that are really supportive of what we're trying to do, that are really, you know, thoughtful of what our experiences are, asking us how we're doing, asking me how I'm doing, is really inspirational, and I think is so indicative of, you know, as we elevate these individual resilience strategies to the organizational or the societal level, or the global level for that matter, how important it is to operate human to human, to show grace, to take care of people, and it really does pay dividends. So I encourage you all to lean into that and to do that for others. And I think you know, being able to be that support for other people can also create that sort of positive momentum in your life that can maybe dull some of the negative feelings that we are all naturally feeling. I think this is the last quote. Hope you like the quotes. This is a Chinese proverb. Watch your thoughts, they become words. Watch your words, they become actions. Watch your actions, they become habits. Watch your habits, they become character.
Hello, this is Carol Hamilton.
I need to mute you. Watch your habits, they become character. Watch your character, it becomes your destiny. So I think, to me, this is really powerful, particularly working through the coaching process right now myself, is thinking about how important it is at the most, what's the word, the smallest, most foundational level of how we live our lives is the thoughts and beliefs that we examine every day, and recognizing that if we can change the thoughts that we hold in our brains and move them into a direction that makes us feel good, that moves us where we want to go, can have a profound impact on our lives and what we're able to achieve. And so bringing it back to the concept of resilience, which is focused more intensely on actions during times of stress and a deep change, thinking about, again, what our thinking patterns are during this period, and what degree are we willing to change those in a way that serve us. And as we begin to wrap up here, I will just share a couple of resources, and then I'm going to put out a final sort of question to the group. But here we have the contact information for Damien. He has a newsletter and a YouTube channel you can follow. If you're interested in coaching at all, I'm happy to share more about that later, or I can connect you with him. I found it very useful and an interesting sort of thread for my career personally, and it's informed sort of my interest in a presentation like this. And then a couple of additional resources that are much more tactical for those of you who are like, great, I understand resilience, but how the hell do I do that in practice every day besides these tools? So this People Leader Resilience Playbook was forwarded to me by the Management Center. I'm not sure for those of you who are familiar with it, but it's like a 20 or 30 page document, and it navigates between both organizational resilience tools. How do you handle stress for your employees, or, you know, not to be very negative, but they go to the extent of how do you fire somebody and not, you know, devastate them, but also a lot of really great individual tips focused on, you know, there's probably 2 or 3 pages of tips that I encourage you to take a look at, that you can kind of personalize the activity that you want to do in the domains of those 4 Bs that we mentioned, that you know, speak to how you like to do business with yourself. And the second is a PowerPoint that I have. It's another webinar from somebody whose career is, you know, facilitating leadership resources. And so this is Sabrina Garba. She from the Glass Ladder Group. For those of you who may have participated in Pacific Council's intercultural communication workshop, it's like a year or 2 ago, she was our facilitator and a regular collaborator. So I will send these resources out afterwards, so you'll get the links if you want to watch another presentation. And maybe take what we've learned here to the next level, either for your organization. If you are an organizational leader, you know, you can apply these. Yeah. And also, if any of you have any additional resources, as we've, you know, you've seen most of the presentation, feel free to put them in the chat if you haven't already, and share them out with your peers here. And the last thing I will do here is, I have a couple of questions. Okay, so some parting actions and questions. And then I would love if anyone wants to share any reflections. I had a schedule to 5:45. We're here 10 minutes early, and I'm happy to engage in more conversation or answer questions if people have them. But this was just a couple of things I put together, you know, in order for you to do a personal self-assessment. According to a couple of the different domains we mentioned. So, you know, taking a look at your body, taking a look at your emotions. How's your body feeling? What mood do you see yourself in more often than not? Is there a different mood that you want to be in? So there's a couple questions there. I encourage you to write them down, or like I said, I'll send this PowerPoint out. And then once you've kind of done that self-assessment and you've kind of better articulated for yourself what your experience is, come up with a few actions. Go back to that leader resilience playbook that I mentioned, do some additional research, reference the slides, think through what are a couple of actions that you'd like to apply to your life to make this concrete. I really love to hear in a month from now that somebody from this presentation was able to come back and said, you know, a couple of these actions really made a difference in my mental health. They allowed me to achieve some things that I wasn't sure was going to be possible. That's me being, you know, optimistically realistic that that's possible, and I encourage you all to do that. So with that said, that's the end of my presentation. So I don't know if anyone has any reflections coming out of the presentation today, anything they're excited to do or share. I think you can unmute yourself. It might be chaotic, but we only have 8 people on the phone. So anyone care to share any concluding thoughts or questions?
Thank you, Alex, for putting this together and for giving this presentation. I am excited to dive in a little bit deeper to into these resources that you are including in your presentation. So thank you for sharing this with us.
Of course, my pleasure. Any additional thoughts? Questions?
I did all that. Alex, thank you for putting this presentation together. If you can send out the slides, that'd be wonderful. I really liked some of the quotations that you put up and the resources at the end. Thanks.
My pleasure. I will definitely make sure that goes out within 24 hours.
Right, we'll watch for it. Thanks so much.
My pleasure. Okay, sounds like we got everything. If anyone wants to provide any feedback or resources afterwards, feel free to shoot me an email, and I will get this presentation downloaded and the slides out. So appreciate all of your time and stay resilient.